Giants. They fell from heaven. They had special knowledge. They were wise and yet terrifying. They spread across the globe in ancient times and can be found in every culture. They are different to humans. They lived thousands of years and had knowledge of the stars. They built grand stone monuments on every continent, and they are even spoken of in the Bible. Who are these giants? Where did they come from? When did they leave? Are they folk memories of great leaders? Could they be real legends of actual giants? Or are they aliens descended to Earth in ancient times? The term for God in the Bible is Elohim, which is actually plural and means bright and shining. It also strangely translates as these beings. Therefore, the term God in reality speaks of a highly skilled and intelligently advanced group of individuals we now term Shining Ones. Because of their scientific knowledge, their spiritual wisdom, and their supposed extrasensory abilities, they were once thought of as gods by lesser developed people who lived peacefully with them in the surrounding countries and domains. From this advanced culture also came the fallen ones, or fallen angels. We know them now as the Watchers, and they are recorded as having mated and reproduced outside of their own kind. Their hybrid offspring we know as the Nephilim, or egregor, and these offspring are described as giants.
Around the turn of the 19th century, there were hundreds of reports from reputable sources of giant skeletons unearthed from ancient burial mounds across America. Human giants are not entirely a product of legend in our history. With the extreme rarity of giantism affecting roughly 3 in a million, it's surprising how often giants are spoken of in the Bible and North American folklore. David and Goliath, Jack and the Beanstalk, and Paul Bunyan are familiar examples of tales involving giants. But while these are thought to be myths or legends, is there any possibility that a race of giants once existed, or were their humanoid ancestors significantly larger than us?
The tale is told that the Great Flood catastrophe that nearly wiped out the human race was due to the wrath of God, or rather, the anger of the Elohim, or Shining Ones, who had somehow initiated this event we know as the Deluge. Its purpose was to destroy this hybrid race of giants and those rebels and insurgents who perpetrated it. Although fleeting references to the Shining Ones can be found in the Old Testament, much about them can be read in the Book of Enoch, an ancient apocryphal text that was largely omitted from the Bible. A third hybrid race of giants, known as the Nephilim or Anakim, spawned from 2 different genetic strains, implies that the Shining Ones were alien. This then is a little taster of how deep the tales of giants across the globe can go. From fallen angels to great floods, their history is rich, complex, and fascinating. Giants have been a part of human mythology and folklore for centuries. They appear in stories and legends from around the world, and their sheer size and strength have captured the imaginations of people of all ages. From the Norse giants to the giants of Greek mythology, the legends of these colossal creatures are as varied as the cultures they come from. The mythology and folklore surrounding giants vary greatly depending on the culture. In some cultures, they are depicted as benevolent beings, while in others, they are seen as malevolent and dangerous. In many cases, they are associated with strength and power, and their immense size is often used to represent the enormity of their abilities.
According to Paiute oral history, the Sitika, or Sahi, are a legendary tribe of red-haired cannibalistic giants, the remains of which were allegedly found in 1911 by guano miners in Nevada's Lovelock Cave. Furthermore, the Paiute creation story tells of beautiful giants who once lived between the Sierra Nevadas and the Rocky Mountains. After giving birth to a disfigured child, the giants treated the child so poorly that the Great Spirit responded by making the land hot and desolate and allowing enemies to conquer the giants. Only 2 giants survived, Paiute and his wife, both of whose skin became brown from eternally living in the hot desert. Aztec mythology features Quintamensen, a race of giant men created in one of the previous solar eras. They are credited with the construction of Teotihuacan.
In Norse mythology, giants were known as Jotuns. These beings were often depicted as being enemies of the gods and were seen as chaotic and unpredictable. They were often associated with natural disasters such as earthquakes and floods, and their size and strength were used to represent the overwhelming power of nature. In Celtic mythology, giants were known as Fomorians. These creatures were said to be the original inhabitants of Ireland, and they were often depicted as monstrous beings with multiple heads and arms. They were associated with the sea and were said to be responsible for storms and shipwrecks. A race of giants of the same name also lived in Scotland. In Greek mythology, giants were known as gigantes. These beings were said to be the offspring of the gods and the earth, and they were often depicted as towering figures with incredible strength. In some stories, they were said to have been defeated by the gods in a great battle known as the Gigantomachy. Giants also feature prominently in the folklore of many other cultures around the world. In Native American mythology, the Iroquois tell the story of the giant Stonecoat, who was said to have created the mountains and rivers. In Hindu mythology, the giant Rakshasa was a powerful demon who terrorized the gods and humans.
Giants appear in folklore of cultures worldwide as they represent a relatively simple concept, representing the human body enlarged to the point of being monstrous. Giants evoked terror and remind humans of their body's frailty and morality. They are often portrayed as monsters and antagonists, but there are exceptions. Some giants intermingle with humans in a friendly way and can even be part of human families, with their offspring being portrayed as regular humans. In folklore from all over Europe, giants were believed to have built the remains of previous civilizations. A Danish historian thought giants had a hand in the creation of megalithic monuments. Similarly, the Old English poem Seafarer speaks of the high stone walls that were the work of giants. Natural geologic features such as the massive basalt columns of the Giant's Causeway on the coast of Northern Ireland were attributed to construction by giants. Many giants in English folklore were noted for their stupidity. Other English stories told of how giants threw stones at each other, which were used to explain many great stones on the landscape. Giants figure in folklore and fairy tales, such as Jack and the Giant Killer, the giant who had no heart in his body, Nix Naught Nothing, Robin Hood, and the Prince of Argon. Young Ronald and Paul Bunyan. Orgs are humanoid creatures, sometimes of gigantic stature, that occur in various sorts of European folklore. Is it possible that many of these folklore tales are based on actual events? Could a race of giants have once lived around the world and in North America? There is evidence to suggest they did.
Despite the differences in the way that giants are portrayed in different cultures, there are some common themes that run through many of the stories. One of these is the idea that giants are often associated with the natural world, particularly with the elements of the earth, wind, and water. They are seen as being part of the natural order of things, and their immense size and strength are used to represent the power of nature. Another common theme is the idea that giants are often seen as either protectors or destroyers. In some stories, they are portrayed as benevolent beings who protect humans from danger or help them in times of need. In others, they are seen as malevolent creatures who cause chaos and destruction. In some cultures, giants are also associated with the concept of time. In Norse mythology, the giant Ymir was said to have been the first being to exist and was responsible for creating the world. Similarly, in Greek mythology, the giant Kronos was the personification of time and was said to be the father of the gods. Giants continue to be a popular subject in modern culture, appearing in books, movies, and video games. The enduring appeal of these creatures speaks to the timeless nature of the stories that have been told about them for centuries. Whether they are seen as protectors or destroyers, benevolent or malevolent, giants continue to capture our imaginations and remind us of the power and mystery of the natural world.
In western Nevada, on the outskirts of the Humboldt Sink, is a small cave. It's hot and dry and isolated, but wasn't always so. It was once part of enormous Lake Tehatan and Pleistocene epoch lakes some 13,000 years ago, and at the time, one of North America's largest lakes. But it eventually dried up, leaving a number of smaller lakes, among which was Humboldt Lake. The cave was on its shore, and in it lived a race of natives who hunted and fished and enjoyed a life of plenty. But there's a shocking twist. Researching these people, you'll find that the archaeological and historical evidence tells us they were not common Native Americans. They were the Sitaka, a race of red-haired giants 10 feet tall who terrorized their neighbors with cannibalism. The cave is real, and you can drive to it via a long dirt road from nearby Lovelock, Nevada, a small farming town that has grown amidst the moist soil of the sink. The stories are real too. All you need to do is Google for red-haired giants and you'll find a raft of websites repeating the same tale. Guano miners in the cave found so many relics that in 1912 they turned the site over to a University of California anthropologist who recovered thousands of artifacts. You'll find that oral traditions passed down by Paiute Indians tells how they eventually defeated the Sitaka giants by trapping them inside their cave and smoking them to death with fire. And you'll read how the recovered artifacts included human bones, split open for their marrow, and bearing the marks of stone knives. What you won't find is any record of these alleged giant bones having ever been preserved for study. Some say that they're being covered up or deliberately hidden away in locked cabinets and secure sections of museum collections. But most sources that discuss the stories speculate that the bones were simply lost over time. It's a fact that early excavations of Lovelock Cave were exceedingly destructive and unscientific in the extreme. Who were these red-haired giants, and is there any evidence remaining today of their bones or artifacts that would prove they were indeed giants? The Nephilim are mysterious beings or people in the Hebrew Bible who are large and strong. The word Nephilim is loosely translated as giants in some translations of the Hebrew Bible, but left untranslated in others. Jewish explanations interpret them as hybrid sons of fallen angels. In Genesis, it says the Nephilim were in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. The same were the mighty men that were of old, the men of renown. Now, this appears to suggest that there was a race of giants in the past, before our recorded history, and they were considered to be mighty, and they contributed to the human race. Also, that they did exist into our recorded history and were referred to by many translations. In the book of Numbers, it says, "And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come of the Nephilim. And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so were we in their sight." Again, we see a reference that they were very large, and their human hybrid offspring were large too. So if these giants did exist, and they appear not only in the Bible but in other ancient texts as well, could there be some artifacts, bones or remains of their existence? Perhaps there is, and it has either been hidden away or remains today in plain sight, but has been misinterpreted.
The origins of mythology and folklore are shrouded in mystery, as they are often passed down through oral tradition, and may have been influenced by multiple cultures over time. However, scholars have identified several factors that may have contributed to the development of these traditions. One of the main factors is the need to explain natural phenomena. Before the development of modern science, people had to rely on stories and myths to explain natural phenomena, such as the changing seasons, the movement of the stars, and the behavior of animals. These stories often involved gods or supernatural beings who controlled the forces of nature and were used to provide a sense of order and meaning in a world that could be unpredictable and dangerous. Another factor that contributed to the development of mythology and folklore is the need for moral guidance. Many myths and folk tales teach moral lessons, such as the consequences of greed, the importance of honesty, and the value of hard work. These stories were often used to teach children how to behave in society and to reinforce cultural values. Mythology and folklore also served as a means of cultural identity and preservation. Many cultures developed their own unique myths and folk tales that reflected their history, beliefs, and customs. These stories were passed down from generation to generation and helped to create a sense of cultural continuity and identity.
During the turn of the century, in the early 1900s, there were a multitude of discoveries throughout America. Newspaper articles carried stories of huge human remains being unearthed around the nation and excavated in mounds and tombs of ancient people. Today, it's difficult to find this information because much of this proof no longer exists. However, many of the newspaper articles have been preserved and tell a tale of giants who once walked the land in North America. In January 1841, an article appeared describing bones and a skull discovered on the eastern shore of Pascagoula Bay in Jackson County, Mississippi. Near its mouth are the ruins of an ancient fortification, built apparently many centuries ago. It appears to have been constructed chiefly of seashells. Within this ruin, several feet below the surface, have been found charred coals and fragments of a particular kind of earthenware, together with many human bodies. Among them were discovered parts of a human skeleton of gigantic proportions. The upper part of the skull was said to be sufficiently large to fit loosely over the largest modern head. Again, in October 1845, an article was printed. The Madison Banner states on the most reliable authority that a person in Franklin County, Tennessee, while digging a well, found a human skeleton at the depth of 50 feet, which measures 18 feet in length. The immense frame was entire, with an unimportant exception in one of the legs. It's been visited by several of the principal members of the medical facility in Nashville and pronounced unequivocally by all the skeleton of a huge man. The bone of the thigh measures 5 feet, and it was computed that the height of the living man, making the proper allowance for muscles, must have been at least 20 feet tall. In 1845, near Franklin, Tennessee, a Mr. Shoemate was digging a well and at 60 feet discovered a skeleton measuring over 18 feet high. It was said a coffee mug could fit in the eye socket of the skull. The bones of the thigh and leg measure 6 feet 6 inches. And in 1856, the Boston Medical and Surgical Journal carried an article regarding giants found. Western giants in their slumber. The Burlington, Iowa State Gazette says that while some workmen were engaged in excavating for the cellar of Governor Grimes' new building on the corner of Main and Valley Streets, they came upon an arched vault some 10 feet square, which, on being opened, was found to contain 8 human skeletons of gigantic proportions. The walls of the vault were about 14 inches thick, well laid up with cement or indestructible mortar. The vault is about 6 feet deep from base to the arch. The skeletons are in a good state of preservation, and we venture to say are the largest human remains ever found, being a little over 8 feet long. Numerous articles about giant human skeletons found continued until 1922. What happened to all these bones? Where did they end up? Where can you go to see them? The answer may be more disturbing than the discoveries themselves.
Religion also played a significant role in the development of mythology and folklore. Many ancient religions had complex pantheons of gods and goddesses, each with their own stories and myths. These stories were used to explain the nature of the gods, their relationships with each other, and their roles in the world. In addition to these factors, mythology and folklore were also influenced by contact between cultures. As people traveled and traded with each other, they shared their stories and beliefs, and these stories were often incorporated into local traditions. This is why many myths and folk tales have similarities across different cultures, such as the flood myths, and are found in many different parts of the world.
The giant of Castelnau refers to 3 bone fragments, a humerus, tibia, and femoral mid-shaft, discovered by Georges Vancher de Lapong in 1890 in the sediment used to cover a Bronze Age burial, and dating possibly back to the Neolithic. According to him, the fossil bones may belong to one of the largest humans known to have existed. He estimated from the bone size that the human may have been 11 feet 6 inches tall. No modern peer-reviewed study has been published about the alleged giant bone fragments.
The origin of mythology and folklore is a complex and multifaceted topic. While there is no one definitive answer, scholars have identified several factors that may have contributed to their development, including the need to explain natural phenomena, provide moral guidance, preserve cultural identity, and reflect religious beliefs. These stories and traditions continue to captivate and inspire people around the world, and are an important part of our shared cultural heritage.
Throughout history, all around the globe, we find stories of giants. Biblical references and ancient texts speak of them. It was common knowledge in times past. The book of Numbers includes the discouraging report by the spies who Moses sent into Canaan. We can't attack these people. They are stronger than we are. All the people we saw there are of giant size. We saw the Nephilim there. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. However, the book of Joshua described the actual conquest of Canaan in a later generation. It makes no reference to such people living there. The Bible also tells of Gog and Magog, who later entered European folklore, and of the famous battle between David and the Philistine Goliath. While Goliath is often portrayed as a giant in the retellings of the biblical narrative, he appears to be significantly smaller than other giants, biblical or otherwise. The Masoretic text version of the Book of Samuel gives his height as 6 cubits and 1 span, which is possibly 10 foot 3 inches to 12 foot 2 inches, while the 1st century Jewish historian Flavius Josephus and the 1st century's BCE Dead Sea Scrolls give Goliath's height as 4 cubits and 1 span, which is 7 foot to 8 foot tall. Josephus also described the Amorites as giants in his Antiquities of the Jews, indicating that some sort of fossils may have been on display at that time, for which reason they removed their camp to Hebron, and when they had taken it, they slew all the inhabitants. There were till then left the race of giants, who had bodies so large and countenances so entirely different from other men that they were surprising to the sight and terrible to the hearing. The bones of these men are still shown to this very day, unlike to any credible relations of other men. The Book of Enoch describes giants as the offspring of watchers and women. In folklore from all over Europe, giants were believed to have built the remains of previous civilizations.
Scholars have identified several possible explanations for the emergence of the idea of giants in world folklore. One of the earliest theories is that the concept of giants may have emerged as a way of explaining the presence of large and imposing skeletal remains that were often found in ancient burial sites. These remains were often interpreted as belonging to giant creatures or beings, and stories about these giants may have emerged as a way of explaining their existence. Another theory is that the concept of giants may have emerged as a way of explaining the physical differences between different peoples. In many cultures, physical size and strength were valued, and stories about giants may have been used to explain why some people were larger and stronger than others. The concept of giants may also have emerged as a way of expressing the fears and anxieties of people about the natural world. In many cultures, natural disasters such as floods, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions were attributed to the anger of the gods. Giants may have been seen as an extension of this concept, representing the forces of nature as larger-than-life figures that could cause destruction and chaos.
Marco Polo wrote of encountering giants in Zanzibar, who were so strong they can carry as many as 4 ordinary men. Mid-20th century journalist Glenn D. Kittler said of the Watusi tribe east of the Congo, men towering 7 or 8 feet are a common sight. Throughout history, giants appear, not as fanciful stories or metaphor, but as real living beings. If these giants did exist, there should be some record of them. Bones have been found and apparently discarded, many thought to be the bones of dinosaurs and were misinterpreted. However, bones may not be the only evidence left behind. Is it possible that some of the gigantic monuments still standing today could have been the work of giants?
In some cultures, giants were also associated with supernatural abilities or magical powers. They were often depicted as possessing immense strength, intelligence, and even the ability to control the elements. These stories may have emerged as a way of expressing the awe and wonder that people felt towards the natural world. It is also possible that the concept of giants emerged as a way of expressing social or political power dynamics. In many cultures, rulers and leaders were seen as larger-than-life figures, possessing power and authority that was beyond that of ordinary people. Stories about giants may have emerged as a way of expressing the power and authority of rulers in a symbolic and metaphorical way.
Imagine our world long ago, when the Great Pyramid of Giza and Stonehenge were young. The freshly cut stones are smooth to the touch without the erosion and decay that will eventually besiege them. Their towering architecture rises into the sky as a beacon of human ingenuity and accomplishment. Megalithic structures are found all over the world, from South America heading east to Japan, and just about everywhere in between. Is it possible that giants, ancient giants, built some of these towering structures? Construction of the Great Pyramid and the megalithic foundation at Baalbek Temple Complex in Lebanon still stump scientists. If giants existed, they would naturally have an advantage over a typical man in constructing large megalithic structures. In 1901, in the World's History, a survey of man's record, Han Fernanden Holmut and James Bryce wrote, "For the erection of these in their present position without the technical resources at the disposal of modern builders, human strength appears inadequate. In popular opinion, only giants could have made such structures." However, archaeologists have found intriguing imagery in the reliefs at the tombs of Rekhmire in Luxor. One image shows two men herding a giraffe. What's odd about the image is that the men are of nearly equal stature to the giraffe. An elephant is also shown as smaller than the men, and leopards and baboons seem to be proportionally smaller. It's difficult to tell, however, as oxen are shown to be of normal size in relation to the men. Although most of the men depicted in the facades of equal stature to each other, there are a few images where some figures loom over others. The smaller figures may represent children rather than smaller men. Some of these figures appear in construction scenes, carrying blocks and donning soldier harnesses. Were the artists and craftsmen of these reliefs depicting giants building ancient structures?
What does indeed seem peculiar is in fact the story of giants as a worldwide idea of an ancient bloodline that goes back thousands of years to the fallen angels or watchers. In Native America, there are also tales of giants, and in one specific tale, we even find the legend of the descent of the Paiute Indians with cannibalistic offerings and baby killing. In Europe, there are literally hundreds of tales of giants, and mostly similar, showing a common origin. In Ireland, for instance, and elsewhere, we have the giants purportedly building giant causeways out to sea and to underwater or cavern realms. According to Geoffrey of Monmouth, the English giants were the only inhabitants of England when Brutus arrived from Troy. Geoffrey also wrote how the last giant was eliminated by Corineus of Cornwall, who enjoyed wrestling with the giants, and when Brutus was attacked by a pack of them at Totnes, he defeated them all, except for a monster called Gog-Magog. This one remaining giant, Brutus offered to Corineus as a wrestling partner. Gog-Magog, of course, is biblical and encompasses that term Og, seen as the giant king of Bashan, and as the root for the ancient Ogma language and Ogmius or Ogdode, ancient giant deities of Celtic times. Gog-Magog has many parallels in other mythologies and literature.
Rekhmire was mayor of Thebes. He may have overseen many construction projects during his tenure as both mayor and vizier. It's also possible that while he was under the pharaoh, he was privy to ancient knowledge, which could have included knowledge about giants if they existed and other secrets from remote history. These may have been depicted in his tomb.
Across Europe, there are monuments such as standing stones, burial mounds, barrows and cairns, and even natural formations like rocks and crags in the shapes of chairs, desks, and tables that were considered to be the relics of a race of giants who were thought to have lived in certain localities. Of course, this relates back to the Watchers of Enoch, who went north to measure and build. Across Scotland, there were various groups of giants, one of them the Fomorians, who lived in the Highlands, and has a name similar to the Fomorians of Ireland. Indeed, it is believed by some that they are the same and escaped Ireland for Scotland, bringing their tales of giants with them. The Fomorians of Ireland were a race of giants who occupied the island in ancient times. The dates are unspecific, as we are talking about myth. They were not the first people there, however, and had to do battle with the inhabitants, the Partholons, to claim the land. Following the Fomorians came the Nebids, who were easily beaten and enslaved by the Fomorians. Next came the Firbolg, who were more successful and actually subdued the Fomorians, going on to eventually live peacefully with them. In Ireland, they were the mythical Tuatha De Danann, or People of Danu, which means People of the Shining Ones. The male god of the Tuatha De Danann was none other than Ogma the Giant, whom we mentioned earlier. His name derives from the same root as the biblical Gog Magog. The stone-building expertise of the biblical figures was now global, and the same rituals were being carried out.
In 1988, Gregor Spory went to Egypt as an amateur researcher interested in the pyramids. According to an article he wrote, he made an interesting giant-related discovery. A local introduced him to a farmer whose ancestors were tomb robbers. Artifacts had been passed down in his family, some sold at intervals, to buy land and other assets. One strange artifact that this man had and was guarding jealously was a decaying giant finger. The finger measured just over a foot long, and Spory took pictures of it. But he could not find this man when he returned to Egypt in 2009 to search again for the relic, and during the 1988 visit, he insisted that he would not part with the finger.
Votan is recorded in the legend of Votan as being a guardian or watcher of the race of Can. The Egyptians fabled their origins at Tepe. This was a time when these Neteru, or watchers, ruled the land following the flood. So these Egyptian deities are post-flood watchers. There is no wonder now that Egypt seems to have sprung up with a ready-made pantheon of deities and civilization, even though it was to clearly evolve further over time. Another term Egyptians gave to the watchers was Urshu, and they were said to be intermediaries between the gods, just as they were in Sumeria. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, by the time it was written, was already confused as to their origins, saying, "Who are these watchers? They are Anubis and Horus, in the form of Horus the Sightless." It seems from even a short biblical and Middle Eastern study that various tribes or nations had indeed emerged from these early watchers or giants. And yet what is not told is the story of the spread of these watchers external to the Middle East. For that, we need to look at other sources. They spread their worship across the planet, from Sumeria and Mesopotamia to Europe and America, and left behind a myriad of symbolic religious languages that has baffled historians ever since. In fact, the certainty that the Book of Enoch gives us is the real surprise. Enoch is said to have been employed by the Watchers as their scribe or messenger, which is why he has been likened to Thoth, the Egyptian god of scribes, and also Hermes, the Greek messenger god. The Anakim were the race of giants in Joshua's day, and the antediluvian Nephilim in Genesis, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The king of Bashan was called Og, and was of the remnant of the Rephaim. Amazingly, these ancient giants were known as Shining Ones.
The mystery surrounding these giant heads not only leads bold investigators to consider the possibility that they depict giants with elongated faces and heavily pronounced jaws, but also introduces a variety of equally bold theories, including the possibility of sunken continents and advanced prehistoric civilizations. Easter Island is considered one of the most remote locations in the world, sitting almost halfway between New Zealand and South America, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Some wonder if a lost civilization left these artifacts in this now isolated place. These heads, called moai by the islanders, remain a mystery. No historical record of their construction, written or oral, exists today, even though there are nearly 900 of them. These heads are about 13 feet tall and weigh about 14 tons each. Could these heads and buried bodies be the depictions of giants? Many theories about the moai exist, but no one knows the inspiration for these giant statues.
We also see that these holy ways included astrology and dream interpretation. This method of divination is highly related to the waking-sleeping state called the hypnagogic, and is part and parcel of the method of enlightenment and shining. They, however, chose to pick a fight with the Firbolg, dealing out land and privileges to the Fomorians. They even intermarried. The name Fomorians comes from FOMO, giant or pirate. This is the same story as related by Enoch about the Watchers who mated with the lower classes. What reason could there be for this later wave of Shining Ones, under the title Tuatha De Danann, to be more lenient on the Fomorians than the Firbolg? It may be because they already knew each other as giant watchers and gods of ancient Sumerian myth. It is possible that the Firbolg were also fallen watchers. The giants, then, are fallen from the heavens. They have superior knowledge. They shine and are different to ordinary human beings. Somehow, they joined with humans and created a special bloodline. They moved across the globe, and tales of their time on Earth are found in almost every nation, with remarkable similarities. Even the names are often the same. If these ancient giants, fallen from heaven, are not truly aliens, then what were they?
Jim Vieira has made it his mission to explore the mystery behind these mounds and others where there is documentation of unearthed skeletons, often of gigantic proportions. He's a stonemason by trade and found himself intrigued after finding a plethora of mysterious stone mounds throughout New England. He found that the construction, and particularly the stone work of these mounds, was impressive considering the level of technology at the time. He also noticed that the orientation of the mounds was such that the entrances faced a direction that was in alignment with the sun during equinoxes. The mounds were built with massive stones and were present long before colonists from Europe crossed over. Vieira uncovered old reports in New England of giant skeletons unearthed from these mounds, often with 2 rows of teeth and jaws that could fit over the head of a normal-sized human. The skeletons ranged in length from 7 to 10 feet tall. While this may sound ridiculous at first glance, it was not an isolated incident and is supported by reports from reputable news sources of the time. Discoveries of the giant skeletons were found all over the Northeast, from Martha's Vineyard and Deerfield Valley, Massachusetts, to Vermont and upstate New York. Other reports of the discovery of buried giants were also found in the South, Midwest, and West Coast. In the Ohio River Valley, a report from a local paper that was backed up by Scientific American found bodies of several giants buried under a 10-foot-tall mound. One female skeleton was found holding a 3.5-foot-long child. Another of the giant skeletons was buried in a clay coffin, and an engraved stone tablet was also recovered. This particular mound was 64 feet long by 35 feet wide.
Both giants and aliens are often described as having superhuman abilities, such as incredible strength, speed, and agility. They are also often depicted as having non-human physical characteristics, such as multiple heads or limbs. Another argument for the idea that giants were aliens comes from the fact that many ancient cultures had stories of encounters with beings from other worlds. These stories often describe beings with advanced technology and abilities beyond human comprehension, which could be interpreted as extraterrestrial beings. In addition to these arguments, there are also several pieces of physical evidence that suggest that giants were aliens. For example, there have been reports of ancient artifacts and structures that seem to be impossible to create using human technology. These structures could be evidence of ancient encounters with advanced extraterrestrial beings. While some may dismiss the idea that giants were aliens as fanciful speculation, it is important to remember that many scientific theories and discoveries started out as seemingly outlandish ideas. The fact that there is evidence to support the idea that giants were aliens should at least warrant further investigation and exploration.
Before there were humans on Palanine, the story goes that a battle was fought between the gods and the giants. Traces of the giants' demise continue to be seen to this day. Whenever torrents swell with rain and excessive water breaks their banks and floods the fields, they say that even now in gullies and ravines, the people discover bones of immeasurable enormity, like men's carcasses, but far bigger, according to the Greek historian Solinus in AD 200. The ancient Greeks told stories of giants, describing them as flesh and blood creatures who lived and died, and whose bones could be found coming out of the ground where they were buried long ago. Indeed, even today, large and surprisingly human-like bones can be found in Greece. Modern scientists understand such bones to be the remains of mammoths, mastodons, and woolly rhinoceros that once lived in the region. But ancient Greeks were largely unfamiliar with these massive animals, and many believed that the enormous bones they found were the remains of human-like giants. Any non-human traits in the bones were thought to be due to the grotesque anatomical features of giants.
And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, that they bare children to them, the same mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Genesis 6, 1-4. Is this the idea that man has denigrated and actually reduced in stature since those ancient days? In the Bible and elsewhere, these enigmatic characters have been called giants or men of renown. The stories of giants around the world in myth and folklore are indeed the folklore memories of the watchers of the Bible, otherwise termed giants. These giants had spread into Egypt and are to be found initially in the Egyptian term Ta-Neter, being the land where the gods were said to have come from, meant also land of the watchers, and so they had come from the same place. In fact, Ta-Neter is the land of Shinar, or Sumer. The gods in Egypt were called Neteru, or watchers, and this included the great father Ptah, which actually means he who fashioned things by carving and opening up.
According to Greek myth, the giants were the children of Uranus and Gaia, but were also never born. Afraid the giants would be too powerful, Uranus would not allow them to be born, imprisoning them in Gaia's womb. Uncomfortable, Gaia convinced her older son Kronos to attack Uranus. He did, and the blood that spilled on Gaia released the giants from their prison. Kronos took power but was soon overthrown by the god Zeus. The giants were enraged by the defeat of their savior and brother, and they took up trees as clubs and boulders as missiles, waging war on Zeus and the other Greek gods. But the giants were ultimately defeated and buried under mountains where their tormented shivers were said to cause earthquakes and volcanic eruptions.
There is, however, a theory that the giants found in mythology and folklore around the world may actually be aliens from another world. While this theory is not widely accepted by mainstream scholars, there is evidence to suggest that there may be some truth to it. One of the primary pieces of evidence to support this theory is the sheer size and strength of the giants. In many stories, they are depicted as being far larger and stronger than any human could be. This could be explained by the fact that they are not human at all, but rather beings from another planet or dimension. Another piece of evidence to support this theory is the fact that many of the stories about giants involve them interacting with humans in ways that seem unusual or unnatural. For example, in some stories, they are said to have taught humans how to build structures or grow crops, which could be seen as a form of advanced technology. There are also stories of giants who possess knowledge or abilities that are beyond what humans are capable of. For example, in Norse mythology, the giant Mimir was said to possess great wisdom and knowledge, which he shared with Odin, the king of the gods. Some scholars also point to the fact that there are similarities between the stories of giants and stories of extraterrestrial encounters in modern times. In both cases, there are accounts of beings who are far larger and more powerful than humans, who possess advanced knowledge and technology, and who are able to communicate with humans in ways that are not entirely understood. It is worth noting, however, that not all scholars agree with this theory. Some argue that the stories of giants can be explained by natural phenomena or by the exaggeration of real historical figures. Others point out that there is no concrete evidence to suggest that aliens from another planet have ever visited Earth. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, the idea that giants from mythology may be aliens from another world is an intriguing one. It speaks to our fascination with the unknown and our desire to understand the mysteries of the universe. Whether or not this theory is true, the stories of giants and their incredible abilities continue to capture our imaginations and inspire us to explore the possibilities of what lies beyond our own world.
The people of Tingis, modern-day Tangier, Morocco, once boasted that their city's founder was a giant named Antaeus, who was buried in a mound south of town. To test the claim, Roman soldiers dug into the mound in 81 BC. Much to their surprise, an enormous skeleton surfaced, which they then reburied with great honors. Throughout antiquity, stories of giants, their bones, and other relics were found and later reburied, leaving no evidence of the human people they encountered. Since giants were often thought of as evil or enemies, their remains were discarded with no thought to how important the remains could be, or destroyed to prevent the spirits of the giants from returning. So evidence of giants are few and far between.
Let us now explore some of the evidence that supports the idea that aliens came to Earth in ancient times. Many ancient texts and artworks depict beings that resemble what we could today describe as aliens. For example, the ancient Sumerians depicted beings with elongated heads and large eyes in their artwork. These beings, known as the Anunnaki, were said to have created humans and helped to shape human civilization. Similarly, in Hindu mythology, there are stories of the Vimanas, flying machines, that were said to have been used by the gods. These machines were described as being able to fly through the air and even into space. There are also numerous stories from ancient Egypt that describe beings who came down from the sky and interacted with humans. For example, in the story of Ra and the egg, Ra is said to have come down from the sky in a ship and impregnated a woman, who gave birth to a son who would become the next king. In addition to texts and artwork, there are also numerous artifacts and structures that suggest that aliens may have visited Earth in ancient times. For example, the ancient Nazca lines in Peru depict enormous shapes that can only be seen from the air. Some theories suggest that these shapes were created as landing strips for extraterrestrial spacecraft. Similarly, the Egyptian pyramids are another example of an ancient structure that has been linked to extraterrestrial visitors. The precise engineering and construction techniques used to build the pyramids have led some to suggest that they could not have been built without the help of advanced technology. Finally, there have been numerous archaeological discoveries that suggest that aliens may have visited Earth in ancient times. For example, in 1992, a team of archaeologists discovered a series of underground tunnels and chambers in the mountains of Ecuador. These tunnels were said to contain artifacts and writings that were thousands of years old, and that described encounters with extraterrestrial beings. Similarly, in 2013, a team of researchers discovered a series of ancient rock carvings in the Egyptian desert. These carvings depict what appear to be beings with elongated heads and large eyes, similar to the Anunnaki depicted in Sumerian artwork. While mainstream science has yet to provide conclusive evidence of aliens visiting Earth in ancient times, there is a significant amount of evidence that suggests that this may have happened. From ancient texts and artwork to artifacts and structures, there are numerous clues that point to the possibility of extraterrestrial visitors. While the truth may never be known for certain, the idea of aliens visiting our planet in ancient times continues to captivate our imaginations and inspire us to explore the mysteries of the universe.
Over 1,000 accounts of 7-foot and taller skeletons have reportedly been unearthed from ancient burial sites over a 200-year period in North America. Newspaper accounts, town and county historians, letters, scientific journals, diaries, photos, and Smithsonian ethnology reports have carefully documented this. These skeletons have been reported from coast to coast with strange anatomical anomalies such as a double row of teeth, jawbones so large as to fit over the face of the finder, and elongated skulls documented in virtually every state. Smithsonian scientists identified at least 17 skeletons that stood at over 7 feet in their annual reports, including one example that was 8 feet tall, and a skull with a 36-inch circumference reported from Anna, Illinois in the Smithsonian Annual Report of 1873. The average human skull is about 20 inches in circumference. The Smithsonian Institute is mentioned dozens of more times as the recipient of enormous skeletons from across the entire United States. The skeletons mentioned no longer seem to exist, regardless of their actual size, and the remaining ones that were on display were removed and repatriated by the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. This presents a moral and ethical conundrum in terms of trying to ascertain the proof everyone wants to see: physical evidence of giants.
Many of our ancient gods were in fact also giants from myth. The biblical God is also etymologically linked to giants. So we have to ask the question, was this ancient giant god really an alien as well? It is not possible to definitively prove that God is an alien, as the concept of God is subjective and varies between different religions and belief systems. However, there are some theories and arguments that suggest the possibility that God may be an extraterrestrial being. One argument for the idea that God is an alien comes from the ancient astronaut theory. This theory suggests that many of the religious beliefs and texts from the various cultures throughout history are actually based on encounters with advanced beings from other planets. The theory suggests that these beings, who were more technologically advanced than humans, were perceived as gods due to their abilities and technology. There are also some ancient texts and artworks that suggests that God may be an alien. For example, in the Bible, God is depicted as having supernatural powers and abilities, such as the ability to create the universe and control the elements. These abilities could be explained by the idea that God is an advanced being with technology beyond human comprehension. Similarly, some ancient artworks depict God as having physical characteristics that are not possible for humans, such as multiple heads or limbs. These depictions could be seen as evidence that God is not human, but rather an extraterrestrial being. Another argument for the idea that God is an alien comes from the fact that the universe is so vast and complex. Many scientists believe that there must be other intelligent life in the universe, given the billions of galaxies and stars that exist. If there are other intelligent beings in the universe, it is possible that they could be more advanced than humans and could be seen as gods. But could there really be aliens? Throughout human history, there have been numerous reports of sightings of unidentified flying objects and encounters with extraterrestrial beings. While many people dismiss these claims as hoaxes or misinterpretations of natural phenomena, there is evidence that suggests that aliens are indeed visiting our planet. We will now explore the evidence that supports the idea that aliens are visiting our planet. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for the existence of aliens visiting our planet is the numerous eyewitness accounts of sightings and encounters. These reports come from people from all walks of life, including pilots, military personnel, and ordinary citizens. Many of these eyewitnesses describe seeing objects that move in ways that are not possible for human-made aircraft, such as sudden changes in direction or incredible speeds. Some eyewitnesses have also reported seeing beings that are not human, with descriptions that match those of classic depictions of aliens.
In the 1890s, Professor Frederick Ward Putnam excavated some of the mounds next to Serpent Mound and found only 6-foot-tall skeletons. But a postcard showing one 7 foot in height was recently rediscovered by researcher Jeffrey Wilson. It may have been one of those excavated by Putnam, as he was the only person to dig at the site. Ross first published this in his book, A Tradition of Giants, and it clearly states it was from Serpent Mound on the postcard, but there is still debate as to where this photo of a 7-foot skeleton was actually taken. Notice that the legs are cut off at the knees, so is 7 foot what we actually see? Or is it an estimation if he had his lower legs and feet attached? Could it have been more like 8 feet tall if the shins and feet were intact?
In addition to eyewitness accounts, there is also physical evidence that suggests aliens are visiting our planet. Some of the most compelling evidence comes from the analysis of alleged alien artifacts and implants. These objects have been found in people's bodies and have been studied by experts in various fields, including science, medicine, and anthropology. While some skeptics dismiss these objects as hoaxes or natural phenomena, there are many cases where the objects have been analyzed and found to have properties that are not consistent with known human-made materials. Another type of physical evidence comes from the analysis of crop circles. These intricate patterns that appear in fields of crops have been reported around the world, and many experts believe that they are not man-made. Some crop circles have been analyzed and found to contain traces of radiation and other materials that are not present in the surrounding area. The complexity and precision of the patterns have also led many people to believe that they are the result of intelligent design. While many governments have denied the existence of aliens visiting our planet, there have been several instances where they have acknowledged the possibility. In 2017, the U.S. government released footage of an encounter between U.S. Navy pilots and an unidentified flying object. The footage shows the object moving in ways that are not possible for known aircraft and has been described as one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for the existence of aliens. In addition to this, there have been several high-ranking government officials and military personnel who have come forward to share their own encounters with UFOs and extraterrestrial beings. Accounts are dismissed as mere anecdotes. Others are supported by corroborating evidence and multiple witnesses. While there is no definitive proof that aliens are visiting our planet, there is a growing body of evidence that suggests that this may indeed be the case. Eyewitness accounts, physical evidence, and government disclosure all point towards the possibility that we are not alone in the universe. Whether or not aliens are visiting our planet remains a topic of debate and speculation, but the evidence suggests that we should continue to explore this intriguing and fascinating topic. In conclusion, the evidence presented here suggests that the ancient tales of giants that have been passed down through mythology and folklore may in fact be stories of encounters with extraterrestrial beings. While there is no definitive proof that this is the case, there are several compelling arguments and pieces of evidence that support this idea. One argument for the idea that giants were aliens is the similarity between their descriptions and those of extraterrestrial beings in modern UFO encounters.
The Chickasaw Mound in Arkansas is another instance of the uncovering of a giant skeleton under similar circumstances. The 12-square-mile mound had its name taken from the chief of the Shawnee tribe, who was essentially known to be a giant with incredible strength. Chief Chickasaw lived in that area of Arkansas, and when the mound was uncovered, the skeleton of a massive human being was found. Subsequently, Other skeletons up to 10 feet tall were unearthed in the same area, all with similar burial artifacts found with them. Some reports claim the length of the skeleton's legs to be 5 feet alone. Other reports show large craniums of skeletons with double rows of teeth. While stories of this nature sound fantastical, there are numerous reports of skeletons of the same size appearing in newspaper articles from the New York Times and other reputable sources. The majority of these reports occur during the mid to late 19th century, which Vieira sees as being the turning point in a censored narrative that has now dominated our history textbooks. He says he thinks that awareness of both the mounds and giants was common knowledge during this primarily agrarian time. There's even supposed reference to it from Abraham Lincoln. In a written account of a speech that he was preparing to give at Niagara Falls, he wrote, "The eyes of that species of extinct giants, whose bones fill the mounds of America, have gazed on Niagara as ours do now." Vieira believes that a prejudiced narrative was created to discredit Native Americans or portray them as savages, because if they were seen as having built the mounds, it would show them as mathematically and technically advanced. He says he thinks that the removal of any evidence of the giants might have occurred because they wouldn't fit into the controlled narrative of manifest destiny. Subsequently, many of the mounds were allowed to be destroyed by settlers and farmers as America was colonized, with no regard to the reverence that the natives held for them. And whether the tall skeletons belonged to a race of giant natives themselves or another race that predated them is unknown, but it is thought that the American Indians venerated them.
Following the times of Noah, the Bible tells us that the children of Israel were sent as spies into Canaan to prepare for the invasion. These spies discovered giants in the land. Their word used for giants is the same as the word used for Nephilim in Genesis 6:4, and so we are being told that indeed the giants, who in fact caused the flood, also survived it. Nephilim simply means fallen ones, like the fallen watchers of the Book of Enoch. They fell to earth and were giants in our eyes. In Deuteronomy, we also have, "The Emims dwelt therein in times past, a people great and many and tall as the Anakims, which were also accounted giants as the Anakim." The word used here for giant is rapha, which simply means giant. So, there were yet more giants existing after the flood spoken of by Moses, and in a different area to that of the Canaanites. We also find that Moab was also accounted a land of giants. Giants dwelt therein in old time, and Ammonites called them Zamzummims, a people great and many and tall as the Anakims, but the Lord destroyed them. One of the giants is even named and crops up in this story several times. His name is Og, which is where we get the name ogre from, and he was the king of Bashan. For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbath of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth of it, after the cubit of a man. Bashan was indeed known as the Land of Giants. Joshua also mentions the giants, or Rephaim. These were thought to have lived in the region near Sodom and Gomorrah in the time of Abraham. It seems that it was this way before Christian times that giants began to take on their evil and demonic aspect. The Watchers were going out far and wide in order to measure, and Enoch specifically stated to the north. This would have a significant bearing upon European stories of giants who were said to have built the ancient monuments such as Stonehenge. Indeed, Bashan, the home of King Og, was said to be of huge stature, a giant city. The ancient giant known as Og was supposed to have lived for 3,000 years and walked beside the ark during the flood, thus dating him to pre-antediluvian times. Phonetically similar to Og is the Sumerian Ogma, or Ugmash, and who has been linked with the Ser Nabas, the giant land picture in England. Ogma is also part of the Shining Ones of Irish myth and legend, the Tuatha De Danann, known as Ogma Grian Einek, or he with the countenance of the sun, the Shining One. In Greece, he was also Apollo, the sun god. According to Greek mythology, the giants were the sons of the earth, which would link with the Hebrew sons of God. The Greek giants, the sons of Uranus and Gaia, the mother goddess, fell to earth from the blood of Uranus in much the same manner as the angels of the Hebrews, who also were against the gods. In Irish mythology, the giants were actual gods who had fallen from heaven, like stars falling to earth. And in Nordic legend, they fought against the gods. Most giants are said to live below the ground, which is symbolically a cave or underworld, the dwelling of the shaman, and are said to possess the powers of the earth goddess. The modern image of the slow and stupid giant is at odds with ancient symbolism. It is very likely that this may have been an attempt by the Christian Church to dispel the worship or reverence in the old ways. The Cader Idris, or Seat of the Giants, in Gymed, Wales, is where Idris, the Welsh prince and astronomer, is said to have sat in the distant past. This shows the belief that these ancient people of stature were once our leaders and had a deeper understanding of the stars than we do, and came from the gods, the kind of knowledge aliens would obviously have.
Throughout the past few years, there were numerous claims that the Smithsonian Museum either hid, destroyed, or in some way withheld the fact that large human remains were discovered in North America. The Smithsonian fervently denies this, and this notion has been debunked by several reputable fact-checker organizations over time. However, rumors and research continues to emerge that proclaims the museum was involved, though it is becoming harder to prove anything as time goes by. Some still say there is a conspiracy to hide the evidence, or at one time there was. Be that as it may, There are no museums showcasing large human remains over 7 to 8 feet tall. If organizations in the past did not hide or destroy the evidence, then either there was no evidence or it disappeared through some other means. It's difficult to believe there was no evidence, since it can be proven that a multitude of newspapers carried stories and reported in depth on discoveries from 1840 till 1922. So where are all the bones? We can surmise a few possibilities of what may have happened. Collectors who purchased these remains at the time of their discovery passed away and their collections were lost or discarded. Some who discovered bones may have simply returned them to the earth when their amusement or profitability faded away. For decades, no one was looking for large bones and they were considered irrelevant. One would assume a large skull would have been kept, though, and a few of these are in museums and scientific study facilities around the globe, though none of them are large enough to pass a mug through the eye socket. Some may have been discarded if they were thought to be mastodon or animal bones, and many were likely misidentified. For whatever reason, there is little evidence of giant skeletons and bones remaining today, and current laws forbid the digging in or around native burial grounds and locations or tombs that may contain such evidence, so no new discoveries are being made. What we do have is a few early photographs of these remains and the stories and eyewitness testimonies from the discoverers, those who did see them when they were on display. It may be frustrating that there are no museums showcasing giant skeletons in America, but that is not the end of the road for the concept of giants that roam the earth. We still have legends, written records, a few photographs, and a multitude of eyewitness accounts that remains have been found and that giants were fairly common in times past. In Native American tribal history, there are place names and descriptions of giants of old. All tribes have a name for them, and they were often honored. This is a list of the tribal names. It's important to note that many of these tribes did not know of each other, and their stories are unique to their own tribe. Some stories are similar in nature, but describe the giants in different ways and how big that they were. Of course, some embellishment to oral traditions and stories is to be expected. Giants in Native American folklore are usually described as being 40 to 60 feet tall, large enough to throw humans into a sack or burden basket the way a human hunter would do with rabbits. In a few cases, Native American giants are described as being even more immense, being the size of the tallest pine trees, which works out to about 150 to 200 feet, and catching whales the way humans catch fish. This, of course, will cause many to dismiss the tales as fantasy, but the fact that they all have giant stories and even name places after them suggests there is some truth to each story, and even if it is embellished and told to teach a moral lesson to children. The Bible itself also teaches using metaphor and stories to impart a lesson of morality and ethics. All oral traditions do this, but the story itself is designed to be told as an actual historic event. However, most people don't believe in giants, but rather scoff at the idea, saying it's all just folklore that got mixed up and sensationalized by newspaper journalists. There's ample evidence within Native American mythology, genetic data, ethnological studies, scientific reports, early excavation records, first-hand accounts, and discoveries featured in newspapers and town history books to suggest otherwise. Now is the time for academia to take a look at this data and to investigate what really happened at the Smithsonian, as an important chapter in human history is on the verge of being lost forever. Mainstream science has rejected the idea that giants did exist, even though there is a plethora of data to suggest, if not prove, they were a part of our ancient history. These magnificent people were either humans like us, just larger, or were an ancient people that predated our modern civilization and could have been their own species. Until such physical proof can be found and tested, we may never know just who these giants were or where they fit into the technological advancements of man. It's entirely possible they could have been alien, and this alone may be the reason their existence has been suppressed. Perhaps one day someone digging in a specific spot may find the remains of a giant, and the discovery will not or cannot be dismissed. Ideally, if a large number of giant skeletons can be found in one place, which would suggest a tribe and not a single incident of giantism, we will have the physical proof for scientists that giants did actually exist. Until then, the data for their existence is growing from diligent researchers delving into the past.